My name is Madison Blake. I'm 34 years old, and last week my mom didn't even bother to pick me up at the airport. That might sound small, but I had just spent 10 years of my life abroad paying off her $2 million debt. I was standing by the arrivals curb in Las Vegas, holding my suitcase, and watching other families rush into each other's arms. My phone buzzed. No call from my mom, no text saying she was running late. Just a Facebook notification. At the top of my feed was a photo of my mom and my little sister on a beach, drinks in their hands, matching sunglasses on, her arm wrapped around my sister like she was the only child that mattered. The caption hit harder than the jet lag. Mom's precious daughter. Something in me went very, very quiet. 10 years of double shifts and sending money home so they wouldn't lose the house suddenly looked different in my head, like I'd been watching the wrong movie the whole time. I scrolled through the comments. Heart emojis. You deserve this getaway. Cutest duo. Nobody in that post knew who had actually paid for that trip. I slipped my phone to my ear, called my bank's international line, and said just 6 words. Cancel every card in her name. 10 minutes later, my mom finally called, voice shaking, saying they were accusing her of fraud and her card was locked, begging me to fix it. I took a breath and answered, calm and flat. This is happening because you earned it. If you've ever felt used by your own family, you won't want to miss how I finally turn the tables. Stay with me until the end to hear exactly how the payback played out. By the time I was standing outside that airport, I had already lived through a whole lifetime of being the responsible one. I grew up in Dallas, Texas. Back then, my mom was different. She packed my lunches, showed up to school plays, and worked as a receptionist at a dentist office. My dad was a mechanic who smelled like oil and coffee and always said the same thing when he came through the door. As long as we stick together, we will be fine. For a while, we were. It changed slowly, the way most bad things do. First, my dad got sick. He went from being the strongest person I knew to someone who had trouble walking from the bedroom to the kitchen without stopping to catch his breath. Hospital bills ate through whatever little savings my parents had. The house that used to feel solid started to feel like it was built on sand. After he died, my mom was not the same woman who used to dance in the kitchen on Saturday mornings. Then Las Vegas started to show up in our lives. When I was in high school, she announced that we were moving to the outskirts of Las Vegas. She said there were more job opportunities there and that a fresh start would be good for all of us. I did not realize that being close to casinos was part of the plan. In Vegas, the sun felt harsher and the city was louder. Casinos were everywhere, like bright magnets pulling at anyone who was even a little desperate. My mom got a job at a dental clinic. On paper, it sounded stable. In reality, her paycheck barely hit the account before it went straight back out to cover bills and whatever new ideas she had for getting ahead. At first, she went to the casino with friends from work, just for fun. A few hours at the slots, a free drink, a story to tell on Monday. The first time she called me from the floor, her voice was excited in a way I had not heard since my dad was alive. Maddie, I turned $20 into $800 in one night. Can you believe that? I remember feeling this strange mix of hope and unease. Maybe this was the break she kept begging the universe for. Maybe we would finally stop drowning. That was the last time it ever felt like luck. After that, the calls sounded different. She would tell me she had been so close to winning big and just needed a little more to make it back. She started using credit cards and telling herself she would pay them off when the big win came. Instead, the balances grew. Interest piled on interest. Late fees stacked up. I watched her chase the same fantasy over and over, losing sleep, losing weight, losing any sense of what was real. By the time I graduated nursing school, the house was one missed payment away from disappearing. I took the first job I could find in an intensive care unit back in Dallas, working nights. I was 23 and spending more time with dying strangers than with my own family. Every time I called home, my mom sounded a little more frantic. She told me the mortgage was behind. The credit cards were maxed. Collection agencies were calling. When she finally admitted how deep it was, that she was hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt, I felt my stomach drop. I did what the oldest children in messed up families always do. I said I will fix it. I picked up extra shifts. I stopped spending money on myself. No new clothes, no vacations, no nights out. I sent money every month, sometimes half my paycheck, sometimes more. When that was not enough, I started looking at travel nurse contracts. A recruiter called me about a hospital in Dubai that was desperate for experienced ICU nurses. The pay was almost double what I was making in Texas, plus housing. I could barely wrap my head around the numbers. For the first time, wiping out the debt did not feel like a fantasy. It felt like math. If I worked there for a few years, lived cheaply, and sent most of it home, my mom would keep the house, and we could breathe again. When I told her, she cried like I had just pulled her out of a burning building. My little sister, who was still a teenager then, got excited talking about visiting me someday and posting pictures from the other side of the world. I remember standing in the airport for that first flight out, my entire life stuffed in 2 suitcases, telling myself this was temporary. 2, maybe 3 years. Pay the debt, stabilize things, come home to a family that was grateful and finally safe. That was the plan. The first year in Dubai nearly broke me. The ICU was full of emergencies. 12-hour shifts became 14. Nights blurred into days. I learned how to function on caffeine and adrenaline and the steady beeping of monitors. When my paycheck hit, I would transfer a huge chunk straight back to my mom. Every time I did, she thanked me like I had saved her life all over again. She always promised it was almost over, that after this bill or that loan was cleared, she would be able to stand on her own 2 feet. I wanted to believe her so badly that I ignored the parts that did not quite add up. The quick trips she kept taking with my sister, the new phone my sister posted online, the way the total debt never seemed to go down as fast as the money I was sending out. Whenever I asked why things were still so bad, my mom had an answer ready. There was always a medical bill I had not heard about, a home repair that had gone wrong, some new fee from the bank. She made the debt sound like a living thing that kept growing no matter what she did. Meanwhile, my sister started posting more polished pictures, new sneakers, weekends in Los Angeles for some event, manicures that probably cost more than I spent on groceries in a week. Then it was poolside photos at resorts, hotel rooms with city views, party outfits, and little captions about working hard and playing harder. Every time I saw one of those posts, I told myself a story about how she was paying for it. Maybe she had a part-time job I did not know about. Maybe brands were sending her things for free. Influencers get stuff comped all the time, I thought. It was easier to believe that than to imagine my mom taking the money I bled for and pouring it right back into the same hole that had almost swallowed us. In the rare weeks when I was not drowning at the hospital, I would sit at my small kitchen table in Dubai and open a spreadsheet on my laptop. I listed out every transfer I had made, every promise my mom had given me, every rough number she had thrown at me for how much was left. On paper, it looked like we should have been close to the finish line. But the way she talked, it was like we had barely taken a step. Any time I tried to press her for real documents, she got defensive. She would say things like, "You do not trust me anymore, after everything I have gone through." Or, "I am your mother. I would never lie to you about something like this." The guilt hit me every single time. I would back off, close the spreadsheet, and tell myself to just keep my head down and keep working. That became my whole identity. Not Madison the person, not Madison the nurse, not Madison with hobbies or relationships. Just Madison the daughter paying for everyone else. I did not realize it yet, But that was the first part of the damage. The money hurt. The sleepless nights hurt. But losing the sense that I was allowed to live a life of my own, that was the part that would take the longest to fix. The first real crack showed up on a night that should have been like any other. I had just finished a 12-hour shift in the ICU, the kind where everything blurs together, alarms and codes and families crying in hallways. I got home, dropped my bag by the door, and opened my banking app out of habit. The transfer to my mom had gone through 2 days earlier. I expected the same sinking feeling I always got when I saw my account take a hit. Instead, something else caught my eye. The amount I sent was almost exactly what she had told me she needed to keep the mortgage current. But when I scrolled through the activity on the joint account we used for payments, I saw something else. $1,000 at a resort in Los Angeles. 2 separate charges from a high-end restaurant on the Strip in Vegas. Multiple withdrawals at ATMs inside casinos. I stared at the screen, replaying our last phone call. She had cried about the bank being on her back, about late fees, about losing the house if we did not catch up this month. She had never once mentioned a trip. I told myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe the resort charge was a mistake. Maybe my sister was paying my mom back. Maybe. The next day, during a rare, slow moment at the nurse's station, I brought it up with Ethan. He glanced at my phone, frowned for half a second, then asked the question I had been avoiding. Do you have actual statements for the debts you are paying off, or just what your mom tells you? The answer made me feel stupid as soon as I said it. Mostly what she tells me. I could hear how naive it sounded. Ethan did not make me feel bad, which somehow made it worse. He just nodded slowly and asked if I wanted help pulling everything together. That night, we sat at my tiny kitchen table, my laptop between us, my stomach twisted into knots. Ethan showed me how to log into my credit report, how to look up open accounts and their balances. I expected to see a couple of credit cards, maybe a loan, all under my mom's name, with me only helping indirectly. Instead, I saw accounts under my name that I did not recognize. Store cards I had never applied for. A line of credit opened 3 years ago, with an address in Las Vegas and a phone number that was not mine. I scrolled silently while my pulse hammered in my ears. There is no way this is right, I said. I do not even live there. Ethan leaned closer, reading the screen. The social security number is yours, Maddie, he said quietly. Someone used your identity to open this. You need to call the bank. My first reaction was not anger, it was denial. There had to be some mix-up, some clerical error. I told myself maybe the system auto-filled my information because I was a co-signer on something. I called my mom, my hands shaking. Hey, she answered, way too cheerful. How is my world traveler? I did not bother with small talk. Mom, did you open any accounts in my name? There was a beat of silence, a small crackle on the line. What are you talking about? She said, her voice careful and light. I explained what I was seeing. The accounts, the Vegas address, the phone number. She laughed it off at first, said credit reports were never accurate, that I was overreacting. When I did not back down, her tone changed. Why are you accusing me like I am some kind of criminal? She snapped. After everything I have been through, after everything I have done for you. The guilt rushed in on cue. This was our script. I ask a reasonable question. She turns it into a personal attack. I end up apologizing. But this time, something inside me resisted. I am not accusing you, I said slowly. I am asking because it is my name on this debt. If something happens, they come after me. She started crying so loudly I had to pull the phone away from my ear. You do not understand what it is like here, she sobbed. I am drowning, Maddie. I have been doing my best. Those accounts are probably just how the bank restructured things. They told me it was just paperwork. They said it was the only way to keep us afloat. Her words came out in a rush, half explanation, half manipulation. The phrase us floated in the air between us. Us never seemed to include me when there was happiness to be had. Us only showed up when she needed something. After the call, I sat in silence for a long time, staring at the ceiling of my little apartment. Ethan texted from his place down the hall. How did it go? I stared at the message, then typed back the easiest lie. Fine. She said the bank handled it. For a few weeks, I tried to shove the whole thing into a back corner of my mind. I buried myself in work. I told myself the contracts had an end date, the debt had to be finite, the sacrifice would eventually pay off. Then my sister posted a video that blew the denial wide open. It was a montage of her weekend in Los Angeles. Clips of her in a hotel suite, doing her makeup in a marble bathroom, spinning around on a balcony with the city lights behind her. At the end, she was clinking glasses with my mom at that same resort whose name I had seen on the bank statement. The caption said something like, "Girls who hustle deserve to play." I watched it 3 times. There was no hustle. There was me. Me in the ICU holding hands with patients who would not make it through the night. Me drinking stale vending machine coffee at 3 in the morning. Me carrying the weight of my mom's choices while she toasted my little sister for being the precious one. That night, I called my mom again. For once, I did not soften my voice or apologize before I even got the words out. I asked her straight out if she was using the money I sent. Money she said was for debts, to pay for trips and casino nights and whatever else she could justify as self-care. She did not back down or admit anything. Instead, she went on the attack. "I cannot believe you are jealous of your own sister," she snapped. "She is just trying to build a life. Not everything is about you sending money, Madison. You think you are some kind of hero because you work a job. Plenty of people work jobs." I felt my jaw tighten. A job. That is what she called holding people's lives in my hands while she sat in front of a slot machine. "Mom, I sent you more than the average American makes in a year," I said, my voice trembling even though I did not want it to. "I have spreadsheets. I have the numbers. The debt should almost be gone by now. Why do you still owe so much? Why are you opening things in my name?" She went quiet for half a second, then launched into a breathless rant about interest rates, about how the bank tricked her, about hidden fees and how nothing was fair. And then she went for the old line, the one she knew landed every time. "If you stop helping now, we lose everything. Your sister will be out on the street. Is that what you want? Do you want to see her homeless?" Something small and stubborn in me spoke up before the guilt could smother it. "She is 26, I said. "She could get a job." There was a sharp inhale at the other end, like I had said something obscene. "You are cruel," my mom whispered. "This money has changed you. Dubai has changed you. You think you are better than us now." The call ended with her hanging up on me. I stared at the blank screen, my reflection faint in the black glass. For the first time, instead of feeling like the bad guy for asking questions, I felt angry. Not wild, out of control anger. A cold, clear kind that made everything sharp around the edges. Over the next few months, I tried to set boundaries. I reduced the amount I sent. I said I needed to pay off my own student loans, that I could not keep sending the same amount forever. Every time I dropped the number, the drama increased. She would call in the middle of my shift, leaving voicemails about collection agencies pounding on the door, about losing the only thing my dad had left us. My sister would send texts asking if I was mad at her, saying she felt like I did not love her anymore. On the rare calls where we were all on the line, I could hear my mom prompting her in the background, feeding her lines about family and loyalty and sacrifice. Ethan watched me ride that roller coaster over and over until finally, one night after a particularly brutal shift and an even more brutal phone call, He put his coffee down and looked me straight in the eye. "You know this is not normal, right?" he said quietly. "Parents are supposed to support their kids, not treat them like a retirement plan." I snapped back at him at first. "You do not get it," I said. "She has been through a lot. She lost my dad. She is alone. If I do not help, who will?" He did not argue. He just asked one simple question. If you were not there, what would she do? The answer was obvious, and it made my chest hurt. She would figure something out. She would get a second job. She would sell the house. She would talk to a financial advisor. She would face the mess she made instead of dumping it on me. Realizing that did not magically flip a switch. I did not cut her off the next day. I did what I had always done. I tried to find a compromise that would hurt me the least. I told myself I would send money for a few more months, just until she caught up on the worst of it. I told myself my sister deserved a chance to land on her feet. I told myself I could handle a little more exhaustion. I did not know it yet, but that decision to give them one last stretch of unconditional support was exactly what set up the final break. Because the more I tried to hang on to the version of my family I wished I had, the harder the truth was going to hit when it finally showed up in black and white. The breaking point did not arrive with a dramatic fight. It showed up in an envelope like any other piece of mail. I got home from another long shift, kicked off my shoes, and noticed a stack of letters on my little table. Most were junk. One had my name printed in bold with a return address from a bank in the United States. I frowned. I did not have any active accounts with them, at least not any I remembered opening. I ripped it open expecting some marketing offer. Instead, it was a notice about a past due balance on a line of credit. My line of credit. It listed an address in Las Vegas that I had not lived at in over a decade, and a phone number I did not recognize. The minimum payment due was ridiculous, and the total balance made my stomach twist. Before I even finished reading, I felt that same cold clarity I had felt looking at my sister's videos. I grabbed my phone and called the number on the letter. A woman in the collections department pulled up the account and started reading off details. My full name, my social security number, the Vegas address, the phone number. I interrupted and told her I was calling from Dubai, that I had never applied for this. There was a pause while she checked the file. "According to our records, this was opened in person," she said. "Application signed 3 years ago. Do you recognize the co-signer on the mortgage listed here?" My heart dropped. She read my mom's full name. I hung up the phone without saying much of anything. For a full minute, I just stood there in my kitchen, letter in one hand, phone in the other, feeling like the floor had shifted under me. Ethan walked in with takeout a few minutes later. One look at my face, and he set the food down without a word. I handed him the letter. He read it twice, then looked up at me. "Madison, this is identity theft," he said quietly. "This is not a misunderstanding. Someone used your information." We both knew who that someone was. I called my mom. She answered on the second ring, sounding distracted and annoyed, like I had interrupted something fun. "Hey, can I call you back? I am about to head out," she said. "Out where?" I asked. There was music and chatter in the background. Somewhere loud. "It does not matter," she snapped. "What is going on? You sound weird." I took a breath. "Did you open a line of credit in my name 3 years ago?" The silence that followed said more than any words could have. When she finally spoke, her voice was sharp. "I cannot believe you are throwing that in my face," she said. "The bankman said it was just paperwork. They told me we needed another account to consolidate everything. I only did it so we would not lose the house. You act like I did it for fun." I pictured her sitting behind some desk at the bank, nodding along while a loan officer slid paperwork across the table, and her thinking, "If I just write Madison's name, this whole mess goes away." Except the mess never went away. It just got transferred. "Mom, That is not just paperwork, I said, my voice shaking. That is my life. That is my credit. If I ever want to buy a house or a car or even get a basic loan, they are going to look at this. You did not even ask me. She started to cry, right on cue. I was desperate. She said, "You were not here. You do not understand how scary it is when collectors show up at your door. I did what I had to do for this family." That phrase again. For this family. It had become a shield she hid behind whenever I got too close to the truth. This was the first time I did not let it work. "I am part of this family," I said. "You keep saying you did it for us, but all I see is you making choices that wreck my future, so you do not have to face your own mistakes." She went quiet. Then she turned mean. "If you had been here, I would not have had to," she said. "You ran off to live your fancy life overseas and left me to deal with everything alone. Now you want to judge me." I stared at the phone like it might bite me. My apartment felt very small, the air heavy. I could feel Ethan watching me from across the room, trying to read my expression. I ended the call before she could twist the knife any deeper. For the next few days, I moved through the ICU like a ghost. I still did my job. I still hung medications and calculated drips and charted vital signs. But in my head, numbers kept running on a different loop. The thousands I had sent. The balances that never went down. The debts opened in my name. The truth was simple and ugly. My mom had not just taken advantage of my help. She had taken my identity and used it like a spare credit card. One night, after a code that did not end well, I sat in the staff lounge staring at a vending machine sandwich I had no appetite for. Ethan sat beside me, leaning back in his chair. "I think you need to go home," he said. "Not to bail her out. To see things for yourself and decide what you want your life to look like." The idea of going home hit me harder than I expected. I had not been back to Las Vegas in almost 10 years. Everything I knew about my family was filtered through phone calls and social media. Part of me had kept it that way on purpose. Distance made it easier to believe the stories my mom told. But now, there was a letter on my table and an account on my credit report that said distance had not protected me at all. It had only made it easier for her to cross lines without having to look me in the eye. I started running the math in my head. I could take a leave from the contract. I had saved enough to afford a trip home and a few months without sending money. It would cost me, but not as much as staying in this limbo forever. When I called my mom and told her I was thinking about coming home for a while, her reaction was immediate and wild. "Are you serious?" she said, her voice soaring. "Oh my God, Maddie, that would be amazing. We could finally be a family again. Your sister will be so excited." She launched into a breathless vision of us having dinner around the table, going to shows on the strip, her introducing me to her friends, like we were just another normal family with normal problems. No mention of the letter. No mention of the line of credit. No mention of the fact that my savings and my credit had been used like a bandage on a wound she refused to stop reopening. I listened, feeling both pulled in and repulsed. A part of me still wanted that picture, the one where I walked out of the airport into my mom's arms and everything felt simple for once. Another part of me knew that was never going to happen unless I stopped pretending already. We picked a date together. I booked the flight as soon as I got off the call, watching the confirmation email hit my inbox. 10 years of missed birthdays, missed holidays, missed ordinary days were all going to collide into one arrival. In the weeks leading up to the trip, my mom called more than usual. She sent me links to houses for sale that she claimed we might be able to afford someday if we kept working hard. She talked about redecorating my old room, about how we would stay up late drinking wine and talking. Her words painted over the rot, but underneath I could still smell it. My sister started messaging me too, sending selfies, asking what outfits she should wear to pick me up from the airport. I tried to answer like nothing was wrong, but every time I saw a new post of her at some expensive restaurant or rooftop bar, something inside me clenched. One night, a few days before my flight, I sat down with Ethan and laid it all out. The letter, the calls, the plane ticket. I told him I felt like I was walking into a trap I still wanted to believe was a hug. He listened quietly, then said the thing I needed to hear. "You are not going home to fix them," he said. "You are going home to tell the truth and decide what your boundaries are. If you forget that, they will decide for you." On the day I left Dubai, I packed my suitcases with clothes and gifts I had bought over the years but never sent. I also packed a folder with printed bank statements, screenshots of my credit report, and a copy of that letter. Evidence. Not for them. For me. So I could not be talked out of what I already knew. The flight to Las Vegas felt longer than usual. I watched movies without really seeing them. I stared out the window and thought about my dad. About what he would say if he could see all of this. I tried to imagine him shrugging on his work jacket and telling me the same thing he always had. "As long as we stick together, we will be fine." But sticking together had turned into me holding everyone else up while they climbed higher on my back. When the plane finally landed and we taxied to the gate, my heart was pounding so hard it made my fingers tingle. I grabbed my bag from the overhead bin, moved with the slow crowd through customs and down the escalators, feeling like I was walking toward some version of my life I had not met yet. My mom had texted me hours earlier. "Be at arrivals. I will be right there." I pushed through the sliding doors to the pickup area, the dry Nevada heat slapping me in the face even though it was late. Families clustered with signs. Kids ran into their parents' arms. Couples kissed like they were in a movie. I stood there, suitcase handle in my hand, scanning every car that pulled up. 5 minutes passed, then 10, then 15. My phone stayed stubbornly silent. No missed calls, no new texts. No sorry, traffic is insane. I unlocked it and a notification popped up from Facebook. I tapped it without thinking. At the top of my feed was a new post from my mom. She and my sister were at a resort pool, lit by soft lights, drinks in their hands, laughing at something just outside the frame. The location tag was a hotel a few hours away, nowhere near the airport. The caption was simple: "Mom's precious daughter." Looking at that photo, standing outside the airport with my suitcase and my folder of evidence, something inside me finally stopped trying to explain everything away. The story shifted in my head, and this time I saw it clearly. The moment the story finally made sense, it stopped hurting in the same way. Standing there outside the airport, staring at that picture of my mom and my sister at the pool, I felt something inside me go still. Not numb, not confused, just still. 10 years of stories and excuses collapsed into one simple fact. I was not family. I was funding. I tightened my grip on my suitcase handle, looked away from my phone, and for the first time in a decade, I did something purely for myself. I walked back into the terminal, found a quiet corner away from the sliding doors, and pulled up the number on the back of my debit card. When the automated system connected me to a human being, my voice sounded calm, almost detached. "My name is Madison Blake," I said. "I need you to cancel every card and freeze every line of credit connected to my social security number and my mother's name." The woman on the other end asked me to verify my information. I gave her everything she needed, then told her about the letter, the Las Vegas address, the accounts I had never opened. There was a pause, then a change in her tone that I recognized from my own job. It was the way people talk when they realize something serious is happening. "I am going to connect you with our fraud department," she said. "Please stay on the line." While I waited, I watched families load into cars, watched people roll their suitcases toward lives that made sense. Mine did not. Not yet. but for the first time, I could see a version of it that did. The fraud specialist who picked up sounded like she had heard 1,000 stories like mine and did not need me to make it prettier. I told her everything, starting with the letter from the bank and working backward through the years of unexplained debt. I told her my mother had access to my social security number and had signed things without my permission. I told her I had been sending money for a decade believing I was paying off old debt, not feeding new lines of credit. She did not interrupt, just typed. When I finished, she cleared her throat. Based on what you are telling me, this qualifies as identity theft and potential fraud, she said. Here is what I can do on my end today. She walked me through it step by step. She could flag the accounts that had been opened in my name, place holds on them, and start an internal investigation. Because my mother was listed as the primary on some of the joint accounts and co-signer on others, freezing activity on anything touched by my information would also lock down her access. It would not erase the debt, she explained, but it would stop it from growing while they investigated, and it would trigger a review of how those accounts were opened. I listened, agreeing to every step. The part of me that worried about how my mom would react had finally gotten quiet. The part that understood how consequences worked sat up straighter. While we were still on the phone, the fraud specialist recommended that I contact the 3 major credit bureaus and place a freeze on my credit. She emailed me links and instructions, and I opened them right there, sitting on an uncomfortable plastic chair in the arrivals hall. With a few taps on my screen, I locked my credit report so no one could open anything new in my name without going through me. It was a simple process that made me want to scream when I realized how easily I could have done it years ago. As soon as I hung up with the bank, my phone started buzzing. At first, it was just notifications from emails confirming the fraud alerts and freezes. Then the calls began. My mom's name lit up my screen. I stared at it ring out once, then twice, until the 3rd time I answered. Her voice hit me like a wave. They are saying I committed fraud, she yelled without even saying hello. My card is not working. I am at the checkout and it is declining. What did you do? The noise behind her told me she was somewhere public, somewhere bright and loud where she was used to swiping a card and having it approved without thinking. I kept my tone flat. I reported the accounts you opened in my name, I said. The bank is investigating. They froze everything tied to my social. She did not ask if I was okay. She did not ask where I was. She did not ask if my flight had landed. She went straight to panic and blame. How could you do this to me? She cried. Do you have any idea what you have done? I cannot pay for the room. I cannot get cash. They are saying I might have to talk to some investigator. You need to call them back and fix this right now. In the past, that tone would have triggered an automatic response in me. Fix it, apologize, send more, sacrifice a little bit more of myself to calm her down. This time, the feeling that rose in my chest was different. It was a tired kind of anger that felt almost like relief. No, I said, I am not fixing this. You did this. I am just refusing to cover it up for you anymore. She switched gears so fast it gave me whiplash. She went from furious to pleading in a breath. Maddie, please, she said, her voice breaking. You know I did not mean for it to get this bad. I just needed help. I thought I could win it back. I thought if I could just get ahead one time, I would pay it all off and you would never even feel it. They are going to take everything. I could lose the house. I could go to jail. You cannot do this to your own mother. I closed my eyes and pictured my dad's face, then pictured the letter with my name on it. You already did it to your own daughter, I said quietly. I am just choosing not to be your shield anymore. I hung up before she could say anything else. My hands were trembling, but it was not from guilt this time. It was from the shock of hearing my own words and realizing I meant every one of them. Ethan was waiting when I stepped outside to the pickup zone again, this time with no illusion that my family would appear. He had insisted on flying in a day early and meeting me at the airport just in case. When he saw my face, he did not ask if I was sure. He just reached for my suitcase and nodded toward the taxi line. "Motel first," he said. "Then we deal with the rest." In the cab, I told him what I had done, the calls to the bank, the fraud alerts, the way my mom had reacted. He listened, then smiled in a way that looked more proud than happy. "You did the right thing," he said. "You did it the way you would want your patients to be treated. You told the truth, and let the professionals handle the rest." The motel we checked into was nothing special. Beige walls, stiff sheets, a view of a parking lot. It was perfect. It was neutral territory. It was not my mother's house, with its memories and its ghosts and its traps disguised as family dinners. I spread my folder out on the small table, laying out the statements, the screenshots, the letter, the printouts from my credit report. I took pictures of everything with my phone and uploaded them to a secure folder Jenna had set up for me when Ethan introduced us over video call a week earlier. When she called that evening, I put her on speaker. She talked me through the next steps in the same way I had talked families through bad news in the ICU: calm, clear, practical. We would file an identity theft report with the Federal Trade Commission. We would send certified letters to each bank involved, disputing the fraudulent accounts and demanding documentation. We would notify local law enforcement in Las Vegas so there was an official record. It would be a process measured in months, not days, she warned me. But starting it now was the only way to protect myself long term. And there was one more thing. Because my mother was the one who had used my information, and because she had benefited financially, any serious investigation could circle back to her. Depending on what the banks and the police found, she could be charged with fraud, or at least face serious civil penalties. "Are you prepared for that?" Jenna asked. Her tone held no judgment, just the kind of question that separates a moment of anger from an actual decision. I thought about my mom crying on the phone, about the way she had shifted into a script that had always worked on me before. I thought about my sister tagging their location at a luxury resort while I stood outside an airport alone. I thought about all the nights in the ICU when I had watched people die younger than my mother. People who would have given anything for more time with their kids and had not used that time to turn their children into human credit lines. "Yes," I said. "I am prepared." The next days looked nothing like the reunion my mom had described. I did not go to the house. I did not sit at her kitchen table or let her hug me while she cried into my shoulder. Instead, I sat in that motel room and made phone calls. I answered questions from bank investigators. I forwarded emails to Jenna. I followed every instruction the fraud department gave me. Every so often, my phone would light up with calls from my mom or my sister. Sometimes I let them go to voicemail. Sometimes I listened. My mom's messages were a rotating script of rage, guilt, and desperation. She accused me of betrayal, then begged me to think of everything she had sacrificed, then warned me that I was destroying our family for good. My sister's messages were different. She sounded confused, scared, a little angry, but mostly lost. She kept saying things like, "Mom says you are overreacting, that this is just how families help each other. She says you are going to ruin her life." I typed back shorter than I felt. "No one ruins your life by asking for honesty," I wrote. "I never agreed to have debts opened in my name. That is not family. That is theft." She did not reply right away. I could feel the tug on her, the same one that had kept me chained to this mess for so long. Loyalty twisted together with fear. On the second night, around midnight, my phone rang again. This time, it was a number I did not recognize. When I answered, a man introduced himself as someone from the bank's risk and compliance team. He told me they had begun reviewing the account my mother had opened with my information. He asked a list of very specific questions about my whereabouts on certain dates, about whether I had ever signed documents at that branch, whether I had given anyone power of attorney. With each no that I gave, I could feel the picture forming on his side of the line. "Thank you, Ms. Blake," he said at the end of the call. "I want you to know we take this seriously. There will be an internal investigation. You may be contacted by law enforcement. Until this is resolved, your mother will not have access to the accounts tied to your information." When I hung up, the room was quiet except for the low buzz of the air conditioner. I looked around at the mismatched furniture, the thin curtains, the cheap art on the walls. It should have felt depressing. Instead, it felt like the safest place I had been in years. Not because it was nice, but because for once, every bill attached to this room had my name on it, and only my name. No one was hiding behind me. No one was twisting it into a favor I owed them. My mom wanted me to come home so I could keep being her safety net. Instead, I had landed and cut the net away. I did not know exactly what the fallout would look like yet. I just knew that for the first time, whatever happened next would not be written entirely by her. The fallout did not happen overnight. It never does in real life. It did not look like a single dramatic scene where a judge slammed a gavel and my mother was hauled away in handcuffs. It came in waves, slow and relentless, the way hospital bills had once come for my dad. At first, the changes were almost invisible. The bank stopped calling me and started calling her. Letters with my name on them were corrected, accounts marked as disputed, investigations noted on my file. Jenna sent me updates, explaining in that calm lawyer voice what the banks were doing, what the credit bureaus had adjusted, what protections were now in place. Every time I got an email confirming that another fraudulent account had been taken off my credit report, I felt lighter, like I was cutting off one more weight I had been dragging behind me for years. The calls from my mom, on the other hand, got louder. She left long voicemails about talking to bank investigators, about them asking questions she did not want to answer, about how humiliating it was. She said things like, "They are treating me like a criminal, Maddie, like I am some kind of scammer. I always helped people. I am a good person. You know that." I listened to those messages exactly once each and then archived them. For the first time in my life, I let her discomfort stay her problem. My sister's tone shifted too. At the beginning, she echoed my mom, telling me I was overreacting, that I was making things harder than they needed to be. But as the weeks went on and the cards stopped working and the trips stopped happening, reality started catching up to her too. One night, about 2 months after I arrived in Vegas, she called me instead of just leaving a message. I was back in Dubai by then, having finished out the last part of my contract after a quick trip to the States to sign some paperwork and meet Jenna in person. I almost let the call go to voicemail, but something made me swipe to answer. "Hey," she said, and for once she sounded like the kid who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, not the influencer who curated her life for strangers. "I heard you were in town. You did not come by." The guilt tried to flare, but I kept it in check. I had gone to Las Vegas for 3 days. In those 3 days, I had sat in a small office with Jenna, signed affidavits, given a statement to a detective who barely looked old enough to rent a car, and walked past the house I grew up in without going inside. I had seen my mother's car in the driveway, seen the curtains move like someone was watching from behind them. I had kept walking. "I know," I said. "I was there for meetings." I could hear her breathing on the line, searching for words. "Mom says you are trying to get her arrested," she blurted out. "Mom says you reported her and now the banks are going after her for fraud. Is that true?" I took a deep breath. "I reported accounts that were opened in my name without my permission," I said. "The banks decided what to do with that information." "Your mom," she corrected without thinking, then winced. "Our mom." I heard the slip and let it hang there for a moment. I did not correct her. I told her what I had not told my mother. I told her about the letter from the bank, the accounts I never opened, the way my mom admitted signing my name without asking me. I told her about the years of transfers and the debt that never actually shrank. She went quiet in a way that told me she had known pieces of this all along, but had never let herself connect them. I thought she had it under control, she said finally, her voice small. She always said she would pay it back. She always said you knew. I closed my eyes, leaning my head back against the wall. That is the thing about lies, I said. They sound a lot like the truth when you hear them enough times. After that, the news came in bits. A text from my sister saying the house had officially gone into foreclosure. An email from Jenna explaining that my mother had agreed to some kind of plea deal for the fraud charges the bank pursued. No prison time, but probation, mandatory counseling for gambling addiction, and restitution payments that would follow her for years. A voice message from my mom, one of the last I listened to, in which she swung between blaming me and blaming the bank, and then, very briefly, blaming herself. I never heard her say the words "I stole from you." What she said instead was, "I just borrowed. I thought I would fix it." It sounded almost worse. While all of that was unfolding in Nevada, my life was quietly rearranging itself. I finished my final contract in Dubai and turned down the renewal. The money was good, but I was done building a life around other people's emergencies, both at work and at home. I applied for ICU positions back in the States, carefully choosing cities where I had no family within driving distance. I landed a job at a hospital in Denver, a place with mountains instead of neon, where the only lights at night came from houses and street lamps, not casinos trying to lure you inside. The day I signed the lease on a small apartment there, entirely in my own name, with my income and my cleaned-up credit report, I sat in my car and cried. Not the hard, ugly crying of panic or grief. Just a quiet, shaking kind of release. I was 34 years old, and it felt like I was finally getting my first real home. Ethan moved a few months later, taking a position with a bank in the same city. He never made a big deal about it, just kept saying he was ready for a different pace and that the mountains were better for his running. We did not build some instant fairy tale life together. We both worked long shifts. We both carried our own scars, but we built routines that were ours, not built around fixing someone else's chaos. Brunch on Sundays after night shifts. Walks around the neighborhood when our brains were too full of other people's emergencies. Therapy appointments we did not cancel because we were too busy. In therapy, I started untangling the mess of loyalty and obligation and love that had kept me wired to my mom for so long. I talked about being the kid who translated bills and doctor's notes for her, about carrying adult worries in a child's body. I talked about how she could be warm and funny and generous, and then turn sharp and cruel the second anyone questioned her choices. My therapist gave it names I had never let myself use: parentification, financial abuse, emotional manipulation. None of those terms changed what had already happened, but they made sense of why it had felt the way it did. Naming things made them easier to put down. My mom tried calling a few more times in those early months. Eventually, instead of letting it go to voicemail, I answered one of them. I was sitting on the floor of my half-unpacked living room, surrounded by boxes and the smell of fresh paint. She did not start with hello. She started with, "They took the house. Are you happy now?" My chest tightened, but my voice stayed steady. "No," I said. "Losing the house does not make me happy. It makes me sad that it came to this. But I am not the one who gambled it away." She launched into the familiar script, blaming the casino, the bank, the economy, a bad streak of luck. I let her talk until she ran out of breath. When she finally went quiet, I said what I had rehearsed in my head for weeks. "I am not sending you any more money, Mom. I am not co-signing anything. I am not letting you use my credit or my name ever again. I hope you take the counseling seriously. I hope you get better. But I am done rescuing you." There was a long pause. For a second, I thought the line had gone dead. When she finally spoke, her voice was smaller than I had ever heard it. "So that is it," she said. "After everything I have done for you." I thought of the lunches she packed when I was little, the way she cheered at my school plays, the way she held me when my dad died. Then I thought of the signatures forged in my name, the sleepless nights, the way she had stood me up at the airport to go drink by a pool. Both versions of her were real. The mistake I had made for years was believing that the loving parts canceled out the harm. They did not. They just made it more confusing. "I am grateful for the good things," I said. "I really am. But they do not erase the damage. I cannot keep pretending they do." She did not respond to that. She just cried quietly for a moment, then hung up. That was the last time we had a real conversation. We still exist in each other's lives in small, distant ways. Holiday texts that are more habit than sentiment. Updates passed along through my sister, who has slowly built a real life for herself doing makeup for weddings and working double shifts at a restaurant when she needs to. She apologized to me in a shaky voice one night over video call, saying she had known something was wrong, but had been too afraid to question the person who paid for everything. I told her I understood, because I did. For a long time, that person had been me. The thing about finally stepping out of a role you were never meant to play is that the world does not end when you put it down. The bills still come. The consequences still land. People complain and sulk and accuse you of not caring. And then, slowly, they adjust, or they do not. But either way, you stop living on a loop of panic and guilt. One evening, about a year after that night at the airport, I was sitting at my kitchen table in Denver with my laptop open. My bank account balance sat in front of me, solid and boring in the best way. My paycheck from the hospital had come in, and for the first time in as long as I could remember, there was no automatic transfer scheduled to leave as soon as it arrived. The money just stayed. Mine. I could feel the old instinct tug at me, that urge to send a piece of it back home just in case. Instead, I moved a chunk into savings and another into a small travel fund with my name on it and no one else's. When I closed the laptop, Ethan walked in from a run, flushed and breathing hard. "How does it feel?" he asked, nodding toward the computer. I thought about the airport, about the call to the bank, about the motel room and the folder of evidence and the courtroom where I sat in the back while my mother took a plea. I thought about the quiet nights in my own apartment, the patients I still could not save, the ones I did, the fact that my exhaustion now came from work I chose instead of from debts I did not make. "It feels like mine," I said. "For the first time, it feels like my life is actually mine." That was the real ending, more than any court document or foreclosure notice. Not my mother losing her house or being forced into counseling, not my sister taking late-night shifts to pay her own bills. The satisfying part was standing in my own kitchen in a city my mother had never seen, knowing that every bill with my name on it was one I had chosen and one I could pay or not pay on my own terms. The revenge was not just in what she lost, it was in what I finally took back. I used to think revenge meant doing something big and dramatic to hurt the person who hurt you. Standing them up, exposing them in public, ruining their reputation. That night at the airport in Las Vegas, when I told the bank to cancel everything and listen to my mother panic on the phone, it felt like revenge in that classic way. I am not going to pretend that did not feel good. It did. There was a deep, sharp satisfaction in finally saying no, in watching the consequences hit the person who had been loading them onto my back for a decade. But as time went on, I realized the real revenge was not what happened to her. It was what finally happened for me. I spent a lot of therapy sessions trying to untangle why it took me so long to see what was happening. I had all the signs right in front of me: secretive behavior, never seeing the actual statements, the debt never going down despite the ridiculous amounts I sent, my name showing up on accounts I did not open. If I had heard this story from a patient's family member, I would have seen it immediately: financial abuse, identity theft, emotional manipulation. But when it is your own mother, all those labels feel too harsh at first. You do not want to attach words like abuse to someone who packed your lunches and held your hand at your father's funeral. So you come up with softer explanations. She is overwhelmed. She is confused. She does not understand how banks work. She is just unlucky. You tell yourself that repeating those excuses is loyalty. Really, it is self-protection. Because once you admit that someone you love is capable of treating you like a resource instead of a person, you cannot unsee it. If you are listening to this and some part of it feels uncomfortably familiar, I want you to hear this clearly. When someone in your family constantly asks for money, lies about why they need it, hides the real numbers, or makes you feel guilty for even asking questions, that is not normal. When you feel sick opening your banking app, when you are scared to bring up your own bills because you know they will say theirs are more important, that is not normal. When someone uses your social security number or your identity without your clear permission and then tells you it is just paperwork, that is not love. That is theft. I do not care if they are a parent, a sibling, a partner, or a grandparent. The title does not erase the behavior. Financial abuse does not always look like somebody taking your wallet. Sometimes it looks like a parent deciding that your future is collateral for their bad choices. Sometimes it sounds like, if you do not help, we will be homeless. Sometimes it sounds like, after everything I have done for you, you owe me. It almost always comes with a side of guilt. That is how it works. They teach you to feel selfish for wanting a life that does not revolve around saving them. One of the hardest things I had to learn was that setting financial boundaries with my mother did not make me a bad daughter. It made me a responsible adult. For years, I thought being a good daughter meant never letting her hit rock bottom. The truth is, my constant rescuing was exactly what kept her from ever facing the reality she had created. She did not have to go to counseling because she could call me. She did not have to cut up her cards because she knew I would send another transfer. She did not have to tell my sister no because I was there in the background filling the gap. When I finally stepped back, everything I had been holding up crashed. It was messy. It was ugly. It hurt people, including me. But it also forced everyone involved to stop pretending. My mother had to sit in front of a counselor and talk about her gambling, not just call it bad luck. She had to stand in a courtroom and hear the word fraud attached to her name, not just shrug and blame the bank. My sister had to learn what most adults learn much earlier: that nice things cost money and that money has to come from somewhere real. Does that fix everything? No. My mom is still who she is. Maybe she will change. Maybe she will not. My sister and I are closer now, but there is still a scar between us, where all those years of silence and half-truths used to sit. This is not a fairy tale. It is just better than the nightmare I was in before. The part I have the most control over now is myself. I pulled my credit, I froze it when I needed to, and I watch it regularly. I do not share my social security number freely. I do not co-sign loans. I read every line of any document that has my name on it, even if someone rolls their eyes and calls me paranoid. I talk about what happened instead of hiding it like some shameful secret, because secrets are where this kind of thing grows. If you are in the United States and you see yourself in my mother more than in me, if you feel a twitch in your stomach when you hear the word gambling because you know you are one bad night away from needing someone to bail you out again, there are people whose entire job is to help with that. There are hotlines and counselors and groups for problem gambling. You do not have to wait until your kid freezes your accounts and you are standing at a checkout line with a declined card and a fraud investigator on the phone. Ask for help before you drag someone else down with you. And if you see yourself in me, the child or partner or sibling who has become the unpaid accountant and emergency fund for your entire family, here is what I wish someone had told me a decade ago. You are allowed to ask for proof. You are allowed to see the statements. You are allowed to say, I will help you this one time, but I need to see a plan for how this is not going to happen again. You are allowed to say, no, I cannot do that, even if they call you selfish. You are allowed to protect your credit, your savings, your future. That does not make you cold. It makes you careful. It might feel cruel in the moment because you have been trained to equate love with sacrifice. But love without any boundaries is not love. It is erasure. You disappear so everyone else can stay comfortable. That is not why you were born. One of the most powerful things I did during this whole mess was talk to a therapist. I know therapy is not available or affordable for everyone, but if you can find a way to talk to a professional or even a trusted friend about what is going on, do it. Not someone who is going to say, well, that is just how family is, but someone who will say, that is not okay, and you deserve better. When you say this out loud, when you lay out the numbers and the lies and the late-night calls, it gets harder to minimize it. It becomes real in a way your brain cannot shove into a dark corner anymore. If you are scared of what might happen if you stop paying, I get it. I was terrified. I imagined my mom homeless under a bridge, my sister blaming me forever, my extended family cutting me off. None of that happened. What did happen was foreclosure notices, court dates, counseling sessions, and a lot of angry phone calls. What also happened was that I finally had enough energy and money to build a life that did not revolve around someone else's addiction. I moved. I saved. I slept. I laughed without checking my phone every 5 minutes to make sure no one was in crisis. I started to remember what it felt like to have hobbies. I learned that I liked hiking more than casinos, and that quiet mornings with coffee and silence can feel like luxury when you are used to constant emergency. People love to say that blood is thicker than water. They use it to excuse almost anything. But here is what I know now. Family is not the people who share your DNA. Family is the people who do not turn you into collateral. The people who do not punish you for having boundaries. The people who see you as a person, not a paycheck. In the end, my mom did face consequences. She lost her house. She had to sit in rooms and talk about her gambling. She had to live with a record that will follow her for a long time. There is a part of me that still feels sad about that. She is my mother. I wish she had chosen differently. I wish she had asked for help before stealing from me, before standing me up at the airport to go drink by a pool. But the part of me that stayed in that motel room and made those calls does not regret what I did. That part of me is the reason I am not still stuck in the same loop. If you have been taken for granted by your own family, I am not here to tell you to burn every bridge. I am here to tell you that you are allowed to walk off the bridge they keep building on your back. You are allowed to say, I will not fund this anymore. You are allowed to choose peace over constant panic. You are allowed to build a life where your hard work pays for your dreams, not someone else's addiction. That was my revenge story. Not a dramatic explosion, but a slow, steady reclaiming of everything I had given away without realizing it. Money, time, sleep, self-respect. If you see yourself anywhere in this, I hope you take at least one small step to protect yourself. Pull your credit report. Ask a hard question. Talk to someone. Set one boundary and hold it. It might feel like the end of the world at first. It is not. It might be the beginning of getting your own life back. And despite everything, I can tell you this with a straight face. That feeling is worth it.